Here is the lecture number 19, and what we are talking about here, this is we are in the process of getting a solution for the linear system. And before doing that or talking about the linear solver, what we have chosen to do is that discussion on some properties of the matrix, and that is what we are doing. And till the last class what we have done, if you look at it, this is where we are talking about the properties of these different matrices like symmetric matrices, skew symmetric matrices, normal matrices, non-negative, all this, that is what we stopped in the last class. Now moving ahead, when we call the matrices, see this portion of the properties and all these you can find it any textbook. So, that is not a problem. So, just but few important properties which are going to be crucial, that is what we are discussing here, and then we will move to the calculation of the linear solver. Like one of that kind of properties or important property is the diagonals. So, diagonal means when you talk about diagonal of A, you only refer to these elements. So, these are the diagonal elements, and anything upper that it is a upper diagonal, anything lower that it is a lower diagonal. And also this is called, if you only consider the upper half of the matrix, this is called the upper triangular matrix, and these are all notation or the mathematical notation how you define. So, you may not need to worry about that much, but what you need to understand here is the concept of that, because these are the things like diagonal element, lambda, eigenvalue, spectral radius, singularity, non-singularity, conjugate, transport, determinant, lower triangular, these are going to be used extensively while talking about the linear solver. So, it is very much important that you get an hands-on idea about these systems. So, when you consider the upper half of it, it is called the upper triangular. When you only consider the lower half of it, it is the lower triangular. Then you can have upper bidiagonal, which can be represented like that. You can have lower bidiagonal, and you can have tridiagonal. Tridiagonal means you have one diagonal, then one off diagonal, like that. So, this is called tridiagonal system. If you have two more, then it is called pentadiagonal system. So, these are the system. Other way also you can think that these will be looking like an banded system, and when we just had a brief idea discussion about direct method or iterative method, we also said that the matrices are going to be primarily sparse and non-singular, but they can be sometime tridiagonal or pentadiagonal system, that means the banded system. So, just moving ahead to that, this is what the definition of the banded system. So, this is a mathematical definition which you can find it any linear algebra book, but what is important again is the idea of the banded system. Now, then another system is that it is called the upper Heisenberg matrix, that is when the components are 0 for I greater than j plus 1, and the lower Heisenberg matrices can be defined similarly. So, which will be the reverse of that, and that means in a particular system you have upper Heisenberg, you have lower Heisenberg, and that can be constituted using your I and j elements. Then outer product means if you have two vectors u and v, then the matrix will get you the outer products, or then you can have also block tridiagonal system, that generally is the tridiagonal matrices in a system. So, block tridiagonal means I can have a block tridiagonal systems. So, it could be one tridiagonal system here, you could have one tridiagonal system here, you could have one tridiagonal system here, these are called the block tridiagonal systems. Now, special matrices, Tiplich, is the entries are constant along diagonal, that means Aij equals to Rj minus 1. So, along the diagonals if you look the entries are constants. So, if you look along the upper diagonal, if you look along the second upper diagonal, they are constant. So, this is called the Toeplitz, and it can be determined by the mathematics like that. Now, also Hankel, that is another matrix. When the entries are constant along anti-diagonals, that means Aij equals to Hi plus j or j plus I minus 1. That means all the entries which are going to be constant along anti-diagonal terms. So, anti-diagonal terms means these are the components sitting in the diagonal. So, these are going to be the anti-diagonal terms, and you can see that they are going to be constant. Okay. Then circulant, here entries in a row are cyclically right shifted to form next row. So, these are my diagonal elements, and entries in a row are cyclically right shifted to from a next row. So, this is the first row which are having V1, V2, V3, V4, V5. So, cyclically shifted means my V5 will come here. So, that is how it goes: V5, V1, V2, V3, V4. Second, V4 moves here, V4, V1, V2, V3. Then V3 moves here. So, finally, you get V1 and again at the end V1. So, in that process you end up getting these are similar values. So, that is called circulant. Sparse matrices. So, the matrices with very few non-zero entries. So, few that this can be exploited. Many of the large matrices encountered in real applications are sparse, and main idea of sparse matrix techniques is not the represent the zeros. It is basically having the few zeros, but they are randomly located. Now, coming back to calculation of norm, how one can actually calculate the norm of a system, and how do you do that? It is having an inner product and norms, the inner product of two vectors. So, if you have two vectors like x and y, then the inner product which essentially going to be the x transpose y, and if you write in that, so it is how you are going to get the inner product of that essentially the dot product of two different matrices. For complex vectors, this is going to be the inner product. So, that either one can write YHX, that is the inner product of x and y. So, property which is very important is that for a which belongs to a complex m by plus n system, that means m rows n columns, AXY would be x a Hermitian y. So, that is how the product can be defined for all x which belongs to Cn, for all y which belongs to Cm. So, C is a m by n system. So, these are m and these are n. Now, once you get the inner product of two vectors, now you can actually estimate the vector norms. And how you get that? The norms which are needed to measure lengths of vector and closeness of two vectors. For example, you can estimate the convergence rate of an iterative method, estimate the error of an approximation to a given solution. So, the important definition of norm is that it is a measure of length of vectors. So, when we talk about the iterative method, we try to find out the convergence rate. So, that is where actually you can estimate it. When you talk about some error, you can also estimate that. Now, the second important point is that a vector norm on a vector space X is a real valued function on X which satisfied these three conditions. Number 1, the magnitude must be greater than equals to 0 for all x belongs to that vector space, and the magnitude of that would be 0 if and only if the vector is 0. Then if you multiply it with any scalar alpha and take the mod, this can be represented at mod alpha into magnitude of x for all x belongs to this vector space and for all alpha belongs to any number. Then the x plus y, the mod of x plus y, which is an inequality, must be less than mod x and mod y for all x and y which belongs to the vector space. And this property, which is essentially the inequality property, is called the triangle inequality. Why? Because if you have two vectors x, y, you can always form a triangle and try to find out. So, the property. So, this is y, it could be x plus y. So, that is what called the triangle inequality. These are some important information or some important definition that one has to know before we do some detailed discussion on any linear system for linear algebra. Now, that brings to that Euclidean norm. So, Euclidean norm on a vector space of n, Cn. So, this is called the L2 norm or Euclidean norm. So, this is square root of all the length square. This is how one can find out. Now, the most common vector norms in numerical linear algebra special cases Holder's form like this. Okay. So, you can show that the important property is the limit of this mod x p when p tends to infinity, it actually exists. So, this is one of the important property for this p norm. This is called the p norm, and when p equals to 2 we can find out L2 norm. So, different norms can be obtained like that. Now, so you defined a norm denoted by the product with infinity. As I said, if p equals to 1, p could be 2, p could be infinity, lead to the most important norms in practice. So, p1 means you get x1, x2, x3 like that. When p equals to 2, you get only the L2 norm, which is the square root of x1 square, x2 square, x3 square, and this. Infinity, you got the maximum of that. Now, there is one, when you talk about the norm, immediately this brings to an important information about Cauchy square's inequality. So, this one has to also know, and the property of that is that if you have two vectors norm x and y, at p2, that means L2 norm, the the dot product or the inner product of x and y must be less than equals to x2 and y2 separately. So, this is another property of the inner product of these norms. Now, similarly, the Holder inequality, which is not that important for p not equals to 2, that is that xy mod of xy inner product less than equals to xp yp with the condition 1 by p plus 1 by q equals to 1. So, that is another property that can be used for the information that in the system of the linear system. Now one can find out the equivalence of norms. How one would do that? In a finite dimensional space, let us say you have Rn, Cn, all these are finite dimensional space, all norms are equivalent. For example, if phi 1 and phi 2 are two norms, then there is a constant alpha such that phi 1 x less than equals to alpha into phi 2 x. So, that gets you an important property of equivalency between these norms. So, I have two different norms phi 1 and phi 2, and the equivalency can be obtained by there is a constant alpha such that phi 1 x less than equals to alpha phi 2 x. Now, you can prove these things, that is one has to look at in the linear algebra. Now, we can bound one norm in terms of the other also. Similarly, if you have a scalar multiplied with phi 2, so beta phi 2 must be less than equals to phi 1 x, which is also less than equals to alpha phi 2 x. So, this is the sort of boundedness of norms. So, the norms can be also made bounded, so you can get these properties. So, these are for some homework information, one can do that. Now, the important information which becomes is the convergence of vector sequences. So, this will be one of the information that would be again used for when discussing about the linear solvers. So, a sequence of vectors, for example, xk, k1 to infinity, that means you have x1, x2, x3 like that. So, you have a sequence of vectors which will convergence to a vector x with respect to the norm product or norm dot if by definition when xk minus x or the magnitude of that when k tends to infinity is equals to 0. That means, in a limit this guy becomes 0. So, that is where you can find out the convergence of a sequence of vector. Now, the point here is because or rather the important point here is that because all norms in Rn are equivalent, the convergence of xk with respect to a given norm implies a convergence with respect to any other norm. So, which will be written in terms of like this, the limit k tends to infinity x to the power k equals to x. So, there is a so as we go along with these properties and the norm calculation, one after another properties use the previous information. So, here the property which was used is the equivalency. So, you can see that the convergence property uses the equivalency property of the norm, and that is why you can write this notation and say that the convergence can be obtained. So, that is an example. You can see the sequence which is the vectors are 1 plus 1 by k, second vector is k by k plus log k, third one is 1 by k. This will converge to 1 1 0, and the convergence of xk to x is the same as the convergence of each individual component xik of xk to the corresponding component xi of x. So, this you can see how the equivalency property is used to look at the convergence of this system. Now, you come down to, so once we talk about the vectors. So, we talk about the vectors norm and we come back to the matrix. Why? Because matrix are nothing but the, this is M by N matrix. So, matrix are nothing but the combinations or the matrix space is spanned by the column vectors and the row vectors. So, it has the column vectors and the row vectors. So, we can find out. So, that is what we first discussed the norm of a vector, and now we want to look at the norm of a matrix. So, one can define the matrix norm by considering an M by N matrices as vectors in Rmn, then these norms satisfy the usual properties of vector norms, which means those three properties that we have discussed for the vector norm, they are going to be exactly satisfied for this case also. For example, the magnitude of A must be greater than 0 for all A belongs to the space in Mn, and the magnitude of A would be 0 if and only if all A is 0. Secondly, if you multiplied A with a scalar and take the magnitude, then it can be equivalently represented as mod alpha and magnitude of A for all A belongs to Cmn, for all alpha belongs to C. And third, which is an inequality, again the magnitude of the additional or addition of these two vectors must be less than equals to mod A and mod B for all A B belongs to Cmn. However, in general this will lack the right properties for composition of operators. So, essentially the product of matrices. So, the case where the dot product that yields the Frobenius norm of the matrices. So, now once we define this matrix norm, we can see how the other informations can be obtained. For example, we are given a matrix A in Cmn defines the set of matrix norm. So, for mod A it is a P norm for matrix. So, we are trying to find out the P norm, which will be the maximum x belongs to Cn where x not equals to 0 is Ax the modulus of P and mod x P. So, that ratio is going to give me the P norm of this particular matrix. As we have obtained for P norm for vector, now we are using or expanding that same concept for getting the matrices. Now, these norms what you obtain for the matrix, they must or they satisfy the usual properties of vector norms. So, that means what we have discussed for the vectors norm, they do satisfy the properties of that. So, that is one of the added advantage. And why that happens? Again, matrix is nothing but the combination of your row vectors or column vectors. So, that is why it always satisfies the properties of the vector properties. Now, when the matrix norm P is induced by the vector norm, this again important cases are for P1, P2, P infinity. So, depending on the values of P, different norms like for vectors we have obtained, in this case also you can obtain those norms for P1, P2 and P infinity. Now, the thing which comes to the table is that consistency. So, that is another important information that one has to know, or the submultiplicability of matrix norm. What do they say? The fundamental property of matrix norm is consistency. That means it has to be consistent, and that pretty much applies to even our numerical system. You want to devise a system or numerical algorithm or the technique which you want to be consistent. You do not want anything which is not non-consistent, and once that has to happen, some parts, bits and pieces also need to be like that. So, the properties of the matrix norm is also going to be consistent, and that can be mathematically expressed like that modulus of A B for P norm, which is an inequality less than mod P and mod B P. So, this is called submultiplicability. So, this is also known as submultiplicability. So, the consequence of that, it leads to that A k P less than equals to modulus of A k P. So, that means I have A k, that P norm must be less than mod A k P. So, that is what you get. Now, A k will converge to 0 if any of its P norm is less than 1. So, that is a very important criteria or constraint, but this is a sufficient but not necessary. Okay. So, one note that it is sufficient but not necessary condition. So, there are conditions which has to be also necessary. Now, when you look at the Frobenius norms of matrices, the Frobenius norm of matrix can be defined like modulus A, which is F stands for the Frobenius norm, equals to j equals to 1 to n, I equals to 1 to m, alpha I j, these are the component of the matrices, and the square, and the two complete term is taken under square root of that. This is same as the L2 norm of the column vector in CMN, or consisting all the columns of A. That means A has all this, A is a m by n system. So, it has all these n columns. So, the L2 norm of column vectors are going to represent the Frobenius norm, and the property is that it is also consistent, but it is not induced from a vector norm. So, the other case it was other way around. So, in this case you can note that this is not induced from a vector norm. Now, moving ahead, you can look at these different matrix norms. That means, when this case it is P equals to 1, this case P equals to infinity. So, the notation is that you have a square matrix n by n. If you have a square matrix n by n, rho A is the spectral radius, which is the maximum of the eigenvalues of A. So, you find out the eigenvalues of A, that is what one can represent lambda I A. That means, it gives you back all the eigenvalues that is there, including the repetitive one, and the maximum one that is going to be the spectral radius. Trace of A, which is the summation of diagonal components, or summation of all the non-repetitive lambdas. Now, you look at the P equals to 1 norm. So, this is going to be the maximum of all these elements goes over the loop. When you look at the infinity norm, mod A infinity is going to be the maximum of I to m, and j goes to 1 to n is the A I j, the magnitude. So, one can represent that the L2 norm is the spectral radius of A Hermitian A and the square root of that. So, whatever matrix you have, the Hermitian matrix and this matrix, the some sort of a dot product and square root of the, so which can be represented as spectral radius of A Hermitian and the square root of that thing. Similarly, if you find out the Frobenius norm, which is going to be the trace of A Hermitian A and the square root of that, or trace of A Hermitian square root of that. So, these two are sort of important informations where L2 norm and the Frobenius norm you can actually represent with the spectral radius. So, using that information you can represent this in this particular format. So, what are the information that one has to have? That information that one has to have is that eigenvalues of A Hermitian A. So, this is a product of the matrices. So, the eigenvalues of A Hermitian A are real, that means they are all greater than 0. So, that is an important condition that you have, so that their square roots are singular values of A. Secondly, the A2 or the magnitude A2 is equivalent to the largest singular values of A, and AF is the L2 norm of the vector of all singular values of A. So, this is a very important information that is applicable while getting these different norms for the matrix. Now, one can compute these things and show that the spectral radius is there. Now, the important question which brings to that, is a spectral radius a norm? That is a question. Now, this is possibly true for some particular cases, like spectral radius of A would be L2 norm when A is an Hermitian matrix. So, that is a very special case. If A is not an Hermitian matrix, this is not valid. So, this is a special case, this validity can be obtained. Now, in general this is not true. As I said, if you have a matrix like that, the spectral radius is 0, though A not equals to 0 and the triangular inequality not satisfied. So, this is also there, rho A plus B equals to 1 while rho A rho B equals to 0. So, that is why for a special Hermitian matrix or the special case of Hermitian matrix, this is possible, this will become a norm. Otherwise, in general they are not. Now, we have looked at some matrix property, then norms including the vectors norm. Now, it brings that once you know those properties, how do you get the error calculations, and where do you get all this error? The error actually arises during the floating point arithmetic calculations. So, what we will do? We will look at some floating point arithmetic and what is the model for that, and then we can look at some sort of a notation and forward and backward errors which are associated with this floating point arithmetic. So, again coming back to the story of the same things, when you are dealing with any numerical system or numerical methods or approximations, one of the crucial component is round up error. That happens because how the post decimal digits are rounding up to the nearest possible digit, and the error can be accumulated for certain problems, and that can lead to a huge error in your final calculation. Or there are some errors which are associated during floating point calculations. So, what is the basic problem? The set of A of all possible representable numbers on a given machine is finite. This is a very, very important and I would say loaded statement here. Set of A of all possible representable numbers on a given machine is finite, but what we would like to use this set to perform certain operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division on an infinite set. So, what brings that? The usual algebra rules are no longer satisfied since results of operations are rounded. So, this is where the problem comes, and while talking about different kind of errors under the discussion of numerical schemes, we have also discussed this round of error, and that time we said the round of error appears because of this rounding of the numbers after the decimal points. So, as you rounding up and you go along with your calculation, then these are problems, because one point of time this can be becomes an compounding error, and the error in your final solution could be very large. So, it has to do with your, the backbone of that is that the set of arithmetic operation that we are carrying out, and this is not an usual algebra rules which are followed, that is why the rounding off happens. So, that tells that basic algebra breaks down in floating point arithmetic. So, that is what the problem is. So, the floating point arithmetic, for example, what happens if you have a number a and you do b plus c and then a plus b plus c. So, this is where the problem starts appearing, and all your numerical system you are doing some sort of addition, division, gradient calculations and all different calculations which are involved calculations associated with this system. And MATLAB one can do some experiment. These are some numbers for 10,000 random numbers, find number instance when the above is true. So, one can find or carry out this exercise by himself and try to check this particular problem. Now, once you say that rounding error that is appearing due to the calculations of the after decimal points, or then that has to do with the machine precision. So, now you see why we are talking about all this important property, because it is not only that you have an governing equations or the partial differential equation and you use your numerics, discretize them, get a linear system, and you can straight away use some linear solver and get the solution. That is not as straightforward as it sounds. So, all these, when you use your numerics, you need to take care of all sort of uncertainties, all possible cases, all sort of exceptional cases, treatment of proper boundary conditions, and finally getting a proper discretized equations. Now, when you move down to the linear algebra or solution of the linear algebra, these are the issues associated with that. How to get an efficient linear solver which would be cost effective, which can give you accurate solution, but at the same time fast enough, stable. So, it just like you have everything at the same time in your basket, and you need to some sort of a maintain and balance to get an optimum solution for your system, and that is where it is always challenging for the CFD code how good your linear solver is, what is your order of accuracy of the numerics, that means the discretized system is, and they are connected with some sort of an calculations which is associated with your hardware. Machine precision means these are hardware. So, you may have a high end CFD code or the numerical method which is higher order accurate, everything is taken care of very nicely, but then you do not have proper hardware or the proper machine precision, then again you are going to get lot of errors. So, it has to have some sort of an handshaking between both the hardware and your set of mathematical instructions that you provide to the hardware through your coding, and that is where the precision of the machine becomes very important. Now, when a number x is very small, so there is a point when 1 plus x equal to a in a machine sense. So, this I mean to say in machine sense, it is not that. So, the computer no longer makes a difference between 1 and 1 plus x, that is where the machine precision has been taken care of and there is no error associated with this precision. So, in a nutshell, if I put them in a mathematical expression, the machine epsilon is the smallest number epsilon such that floating of 1 plus epsilon not equals to 1. So, this number is denoted by u for some time epsilon. Okay. So, many discussions are going on and rules and all these things for this kind of calculations, how to get a precise machine in error. So, once you talk about the errors which are associated with the machine precision, you have certain rules to follow, and rules number 1 which says FLX equals to x into 1 plus epsilon, where epsilon is going to be very small. Here u sometimes epsilon, this is the number. Okay. So, the epsilon satisfy this. Rule number 2, for all operation like any arithmetic operation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, FL x dot y must be x dot y 1 plus epsilon dot, where epsilon dot is again less than equals to u. So, this is again an important rule which takes care the basic arithmetic operation. So, that takes care of that thing. Rule number 3, which is very specific to addition and multiplication operations. So, the floating point a dot b equals to floating point b dot a. So, this is only true for this dot belong the set of plus and multiplication only. So, these are 3 rules which are very important for handling the precision of the machine. Now, one can take an example and quickly glance through the things. You can consider the sum of 3 numbers which are very simple. I mean, these are some sort of an school kid, they do y equals to a plus b plus c. You given a 3 numbers, you just get the addition. Okay. So, what you do done as floating point of floating point a plus b plus c. So, your eta equals to floating point a plus b, which is this component, this is my eta, which is equivalent to a plus b 1 plus epsilon. Now, y1 is floating point eta plus c. So, that is the total component, this is your y1. So, it is eta plus c 1 plus epsilon 2. Now, what is eta? Eta is a plus b 1 plus epsilon. So, I am putting back the values of eta here. So, eta is a plus b 1 plus epsilon plus c into multiplied with 1 plus epsilon 2. So, if you just rearrange this stuff, I mean essentially some sort of an algebra, it turns out a plus b plus c plus a plus b into epsilon with the whole thing, the bracket gets multiplied with a 1 plus epsilon, and if you take out that a plus b plus c out, 1 plus a plus b divided by a plus b plus c, epsilon 1, 1 plus epsilon 2 and epsilon 2. So, there are terms which are associated with epsilon 1, epsilon 2, and then if you disregard those higher order terms, that means the product of epsilon 1 and epsilon 2. If epsilon happens to be small, so this won't contribute too much, then the whole calculation of that, which is essentially your y1, is a plus b plus c 1 plus some epsilon 3. So, epsilon 3 is nothing but a plus b by this epsilon and epsilon 2, and we have actually discarded the values for higher order terms epsilon 1. So, these sends you back the property of this. So, that is what it satisfies. So, now if you redo the calculation or the computation as y2 equals to floating point of a plus floating point b plus c. So, you need to do that algebra here. So, if you need to do the algebra, then what you get, the floating point a plus floating point b, it would be a plus b plus c into epsilon 4. So, this also satisfies. So, the first error is amplified by the factor a plus b by y in the first case and b plus c by y in the second case. And in order of to sum n numbers more accurately, it is better to start with the small numbers first. Okay. But one has to be careful if the numbers have mixed sign. So, that is also an important condition to be noticed. But while we say that you start with the smaller number first, then the sorting also takes some sort of an computing cost. So, everything comes with some sort of an computing overhead, and all this computing overhead is associated with your final output. So, given an option, you need to have a very good code or numerical methods which should be efficient and should be fast enough. Now, moving ahead with this discussion of norms and others, now you can find out the absolute value notation. How one would define? You have certain given vectors x and mod x, x, and mod x is the vector with components xi. So, you have two different things, that is x is the component wise absolute value of x. So, if you look at the similarity property of the matrices, so mod of A equivalent to Aij mod of that. So, these are the two things, one is applicable for vector, other is for matrix, and most of the time these properties are using the properties of vector. So, the obvious inequality that turns out to be floating point of aij minus ai must be less than of u bar alpha ij, which translate into floating point of a plus e with mod e is this. So, the arithmetic operations, the error which are associated with the vector that we have seen can be extended now for metrics, and there could be also similar sort of errors, and which means a less than equals to b means a I j less than equals to b I j for all I and j. Okay. So, again one would like to look at the error for the inner product. So, we have defined the inner product earlier. Now, one would like to see the error product which is associated with these inner products. So, inner products are in the innermost parts of many calculation, because if you are dealing with vector or if you are dealing with rather matrix, matrix comprises with some row and column vectors. Essentially or whether directly or indirectly you do with lot of vectors calculations. So, that is where the inner product becomes an important key component. What is the lemma associated with that? If delta I mod of delta I less than that small value u bar n into u bar less than 1, then product of 1 plus delta I equals to 1 plus theta n, where theta n must be less than equals to n multiplied with this u bar divided by 1 minus n u subscript. This is the small number associated with machine precision. So, the common notation is that you can define gamma n, which is essentially this particular term can be equivalent to gamma n. So, the result of this inner product is that floating point x transpose y minus x transpose y, the magnitude of that satisfies less than equals to gamma n x transpose mod y. So, this is a very very important theory that is required for this computing of this matrix system. Now, one can look at this using some sort of numbers. Let us say when your gamma n less than equals to 1.01 nu, then floating point x transpose y minus x transpose y would be less than that. So, whatever we got here, it just uses that value, and gamma n less than equals to 1 point means 1 by 1 minus nu less than equals to 1.01 or 01. So, every term which are associated with all these calculations, gamma n and all these, they have certain significance or physical significance. Now, for the smallest number being 2 into 10 to the power minus 16, the assumption gamma n less than equals to 1.01 holds for n less than equals to 4.46. So, one can always do some sort of an back calculation of all this. So, what is the consequence of this particular lemma is that a dot star b, a multiplied with b minus floating point of a multiplied with b, which must be less than equals to gamma n mod a multiplied with mod b. So, that is what the, so one can write in a other way around floating point x transpose y minus x transpose y, the magnitude of that less than equals to n the u subscript x transpose y bar, which is the order of smaller square. So, u subscript square. So, that is the order. So, one can obtain the value separately. So, this is some. Now, once you move, so you got to know by this time how to calculate the error. So, now one can say how we define forward error, how we can define backward errors. So, the definition is like this: assume the approximation y hat to y, where y is a function and it can be computed with some arithmetic precision epsilon. So, the upper bound for the forward error would be delta y equals to y minus y hat, or the magnitude of that. So, that is the upper bound of for the forward error. So, this is not always easy. So, one has to note that. So, the alternatively one can find some equivalent perturbation on the original data or the initial data, which produces the result y hat. So, in the other words, if I have to write, I can write f x plus delta x, which will lead to my upper hat. Okay. So, this is the problem statement, the approximation of y hat to y. So, the what we are doing, that approximation to y. So, the initial data, if it is perturbed, it will lead to that. So, the value of delta x is called the backward error, and you can do certain analysis and find that bound of the backward error. So, when you talk about the forward error, that means I am going from this to this. So, I am straightaway finding what is my final these things, and the difference of that is going to get me the forward error. And when you are trying to do the backward error, initial data is perturbed such that you get to the y hat with less error. So, take again an example which will allow you to understand that thing in a much clear way. Let us consider the matrix A having 2 by 2 matrix. Obviously, you have A, B, 0, C, B another matrix which is also 2 by 2, you got D, E, 0, F. So, the similar elements like second row first element are having 0 values. So, you consider the product of the floating point product of A dot B. So, what do you get? First term you get AD 1 plus epsilon 1, second term you get AE 1 plus epsilon 2, BF 1 plus epsilon 3, and the whole thing multiplied with 1 plus epsilon 4. This exactly follows the multiplication rule that we have discussed earlier. This term would be 0 because they are both having 0, and this term, the last term would be CF, and this would be also a 2 by 2 system, CF 1 plus epsilon 5. So, all these epsilons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are basically some small numbers. So, these results one can write, you use some property of the matrices and write that A in the first matrix which you divide by 2 by 2 and the second one 2 by 2, you write A, B into 1 plus epsilon 3, 1 plus epsilon 4, 0, C into 1 plus epsilon 5, D into 1 plus epsilon 1, E into epsilon 2, epsilon 4, 0 F. So, what you get floating point A dot B is A plus EA, B plus EB. So, the backward errors EA satisfy the criteria less than second orders, and this is also less than B. So, this is what you get when you find out the forward and backward error. So, we will stop here and take it up in the next lecture.